we'd agree. I mean, it would be kind of ridiculous if after all this time we arrived at that. No, I don't think something can depend on something. I mean, that's perfunctory.
No, not only that.
We agree that contingencies
Perfect,
exist.
but
you're setting out to prove that Allah definitely does exist.
But what I'm sure,
and moreover,
perfect.
To prove that he knows everything.
But what you also said here, which is very good. Good. No, it's not the mountain. I think you're going to come to it. You're an intelligent man, and I believe you're going to come.
I'm a genius. You're in a hopeless cause, but you're giving it a good go.
Yeah, thank you. So if I'm going against a genius like you, then hopefully I'll learn, because I always like to learn more.
I mean, we have different worldviews.
Yes, good.
I'll do what I can.
Okay. So what I was going to say was this: is that basically
sharpen each other.
Yeah. What I was going to say is that basically, when it comes to so what we've established is that dependent things exist, yeah? And also, we've established that things can exist atemporally, yeah? Like mathematics, etc. Now, what I'm saying is that
we have conjecture. We don't, I mean, the existence of mathematics could be no more than saying that we believe it's the case.
But the existence of mathematics is, we can all say, mathematics can be realized or can be understood or can be conceptualized without reference to temporality.
It's a concept. That's the point. So conceiving of something doesn't mean that it's actual.
Good. Now going back to realism, anti-realism, idealism.
But here's the point.
Yeah.
We're just basically saying that it's possible to conceive of things, but we have to do much more in the case of Allah. We can't just say it's possible to conceive that all-knowing being exists. You're like, dude, I'm going to prove it.
No, good. But what I'm saying to you is this: it's not only something which you can conceive. Now it depends on what vision you have. Like, what are you an idealist, or are you a dualist, or a materialist? I don't know. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that already we have, we've kind of established that materialism or naturalism, if you like, in a clearest sense of or the strictest sense of the word, couldn't be a consistent way of understanding the world, because we've said that mathematics is something which exists extramentally.
I mean, I think naive realism or a kind of naive physicalism, but I don't. But I mean, that's like philosophical detritus. No one really believes in that stuff, you know, since the collapse of probably logical positivism.
So what's your view on it? What's your
naive realism or something?
Yeah.
Like
What
is my metaphysical view? What are my metaphysics?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I'm troubling me for you. I'm hard philosophical skeptic.
Yeah, so, but would you identify as a realist, anti-realist, idealist, naturalist, or where would you go in those camps?
See, but that's the whole point. I mean, I'm skeptic to the point of empiricism, which is what makes your job so hard, right? Because convincing a skeptic is super difficult, right?
Okay.
Because you have to build the foundations and show they're true, and then build basically the case, show that God exists, and then build the omniscient case. And so, what I'm asking you to do is to do that from a ground zero. So, but I am actually that way. I'm pretty much close to a etheric skeptic. So,
but
I'm like you in this sense.
I would put
I'm like you in one sense. The last thing I'll say is that I would assign certain probabilities.
Okay.
In a hazy fashion to certain things being the case, but you're in a very different camp, which is a claim of absolute epistemological certainty, which I think is like Mount Everest with flip-flops, right? So I admit your job is much harder, but that's why. But
you're saying that probabilistic arguments are epistemologically justifiable from your perspective, that you could make a probabilistic argument and you.
It might be. That's the whole point. I'm a etheric skeptic, so I would assign a probability to that being
the case.
But
when you're making that probabilistic argument, where would your starting point? Or if someone was making a probabilistic argument to you, where would your starting point be in terms of substance theory? Where would it be? Would you start off as a dualist position, or an idealist position, or a naturalist position, or a realist position, or anti-realist position?
A puring position, right? When someone tells me that they're certain that there is a God who knows absolutely everything, I'm like, I need to listen to this guy, because either he has no idea what he's talking about, or he does, and I need to pay very close attention because, it's very difficult, epistemologically speaking, to provide demonstrations of really very much.
Yes.
Like you've read Islamic theology, right? So you know about the struggles of Ibn Sina, or Ibn Taymiyyah, or al-Ghazali, the deliverance from skepticism, not deliverance from error, right? many of the greatest philosophers in Islam, like many of the greatest philosophers which followed them, ran into hard skepticism.
Yep.
And it defeated many.
Yes.
Right? Who
Yeah.
then turned, they didn't lose their faith,
Yeah.
but they lost the belief that they could really prove by, as Ghazali says, by a concatenation of proofs and arguments that this is the case. But you're saying, by concatenation of proof and arguments, you can do what Ghazali failed at.
No, but then he
And
came
so
to the conclusion
my ears go,
because Ghazali changed his mind afterwards on the issues.
Yes, but
Kind of
why?
like Rene Descartes. He went
Yeah,
through the same meditation.
absolutely.
Yeah,
They're so similar.
Yeah.
And so few people get that.
Yeah.
That's impressive, you know.
Yeah. So I was going to say
But
that
how did Ghazali come to that conclusion?
he went through a skeptic process. Yeah.
But how did he come to the conclusion that he was still a believing Muslim?
He's the one who made the common William Lane Craig Hughes kind of cosmological argument.
I mean, it wasn't original to him. It's not the argument
Yeah.
that
Well, he's the one
rescued
who
his
put it
faith.
in that way.
So basically, he wrote Munkira min al-Dalal. So this
Deliverance from error.
Yeah, and basically, he has this breakdown. He's this genius. You know, he goes on the sabbatical. He's in the middle of teaching his students.
Yeah.
Are they on your team or mine? I think. Yeah.
I don't think they're on anyone's team.
Yeah, really, their own team. Yeah. So basically, at the end of that book, and I've only read the English, right?
Yeah.
He says this wasn't by this great logical process of proofs and errors and so on, which he was a master at.
Yes,
right?
yes.
He
Essentially
wrote like.
spiritualism.
Yes.
Yeah.
He basically
Yeah.
he looks at the Sufis.
Yes,
And he
yes.
says somehow they approach God, but
Yes.
they don't do it. They do it as if in a dream. Right,
Yeah.
and so he says it's by this. He actually says the sweet light of faith that Allah caused to reappear in my heart.
And I hope that that sweet light of faith comes into your heart as well,
Dude,
man.
I'm a skeptic. Never say never.
Never say never, bro.
Never
Look,
say-
it's been a
We're-
pleasure.
We're not done. You didn't get to.
Because I need to pray. But okay,
okay.
But do you know? Here's, I'll be honest with you. I have a sneaky suspicion that you already know this proof.
What?
And you already look. I have a sneaky suspicion.
I have.
Look, you do.
Well, what do you do?
You've read Ghazali. You've read
Go
Al-Muqidh
pray,
min
go
al-Dalal.
pray. I've read everything. Go and pray, and let's have a little.
What is it?
Finish off.
Is it time to pray now? Is it Maghrib time yet? Is it Maghrib time yet?
If
we'll
you
give it
need
5
to,
times.
and then let's just quickly finish off.
Okay, let's finish off now. I think there's a bit of time. Go on.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, we have some names here, right? I mean, like, I came from the Western tradition where you hear these names of the Muslim philosophers.
Yes.
And you start with this kind of...
By the way, can I ask a question? What did you study? You studied philosophy, yeah?
Studied everything.
Did you study it formally?
I've studied everything. I'm an artist.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I've studied cancer, neuroscience.
Wow.
I make films. Started 2 technology companies.
Yeah.
You're up against impossible opposition.
Oh my
But
God.
you've done well. I think
Oh my
I think you've done well. The point is this. The point really is to say that I came from what I think is what you'd call an Orientalist, right? A kind of like post-colonial, quite racist, like caring about these Muslim philosophers, right? And I picked these up like, yeah, Muslim philosophers, so let's see. And I was like, Descartes, Immanuel Kant, I was like, these are some of the best thinkers that we've had. And I'm only reading the translations, but I can see how sharp someone like even Taymiyyah is, any of the great thinkers, Umar Khayyam, Ghazali, others, and I was just incredibly impressed. Not with Ghazali as a philosopher, but with Ghazali would clean up the speaker's corner because he was so good at disassembling people's positions, but he was so good at disassembling his own. That was his problem. And so his Ash'ari, devout Ash'ari belief tended much more Sufi. The Ghazali that most Muslims admire, I think, is a Ghazali that's the first 40 years of his life, right? And so that's why I ask you the question, because
but you know that
you have the benefits that he didn't, right? You have like all of modern knowledge, you have like Google, and you have many people around you. You have the Hamza Tortoises and these guys who are all, you know, the divine reality. That's quite the claim, but not one Ghazali would have made. And so that's why I just, you know,
I respect where you're coming from now. But once again, I think basically the argument I'm most convinced with from the literature is an argument made by Ibn Sina, Avicenna. Okay, so I've written a book called Kalam Cosmological Arguments.
You've written a book?
Yeah, I've written a book on it. It's actually been peer reviewed as well.
That's a journal.
That has been reviewed. It's been reviewed by because I was doing at that time. When I say peer reviewed here, I should be clear. Some journals need to be peer reviewed by 2 things, and I bring it back with like amendments and stuff. Yeah, but this is because I was writing this as part of my one of my master's degrees. I was doing it in SOAS.
What are your masters in? Don't tell me if you don't want to. But anyway.
Yeah, it's fine. It's no problem.
Okay. So you wrote a book on
Kalam Cosmological Arguments. And so my teacher, his name was Emin Shahada. He was he's basically he's one of the editors of Brill. I'm not sure if you know Brill. Yeah. So he was a great teacher. I learned a lot from him for a long time. And then when he was teaching me, one of the things I really fell in love with, to be honest with you, was Ibn Sina's argument. Because we went through all of those kind of classical scholars, and one of the ones that I felt was, I don't agree with him theologically, but I felt as a philosopher,
his theology is
it's not
unrecognizable to
to Muslims. But that philosophy, and I think that deep down, Al-Ghazali and Ibn Taymiyyah and everyone that came after him recognized the genius, and they cleaned up the theological aspects, but they took the arguments. In my opinion. So people like Al-Ghazali, they actually took the arguments of Avicenna. So the argument basically that I'm making to you is his argument, not mine. And it's the argument of, basically it's called Burhan al-Siddiqeen, or the argument he makes in a book called Al-Isharat al-Tanbihat, or pointers and kind of reminders, which is extant now, is translated I think as well. Peter Adamson has some good stuff in English language, which you can consult. So basically the argument is this, is that he says, about contingency, he says the same thing as I said. You can't have an infinite regress of causes or an infinite regress of, and by the way, he was an eternalist, right? So he believes in the eternal universe, but he says that there's a difference between believing an infinite regress of time and an infinite regress of causes. So he and other people believed in an infinite regress of things. Like Ibn Taymiyyah believed in perpetual pre-creation, which in
cyclical creation and destruction.
So not destruction, but creation in the past, perpetual in the past. Anyway, so
you mean like so an infinite regress of Allah's evolving of
Ibn Taymiyyah basically believed in something called hawadith la awwala laha, which means that God continued to create perpetually into the past. So there was no beginning, if you like. So he was, in many ways, he was similar to the eternalist.
I've read like 3 different opinions about what Ibn Taymiyyah's opinions were about
he wasn't
the creation of the prophet, the first prophet, Adam, and I think he changed his views over the course of his life.
On this issue, that's the only thing I came across in his book called Ta'arud bin al-Aqli wal Naql. I mean, to be honest with you, he's written a few books, but this seems to be his opinion. Because how do you know what Ibn Taymiyyah's final opinion was through his student Ibn Qayyim, basically. He changed his opinion on a few things, but basically he believed in perpetual creation and pre-eternally, and so he wasn't an eternalist, but he believes in an infinite regress of things. Ibn Sina believes in an infinite regress of time. So in a sense, an infinite or an infinity of time. So he believed in the same thing that Aristotle believed in, Farabi believed in, Kindi believed in. But the point is that they all rejected an infinite regress of causation. Like even Aristotle rejected it, and Farabi, Aristotle, Plato I think as well. You know, Avicenna definitely rejected it. The Jews rejected it, like Maimonides, etc. Aquinas rejected it. So I haven't actually seen anything in the medieval literature going back to the Hellenistic times of anyone who said that they believe in an infinite regress of causation. I've not seen that. I've seen them believe in infinite regress of things perpetually into the past and so on, but not of causation particular. So the argument he's making is
there is the cyclical, eternal birth and death, which just never ends. So it's basically just a loop. And it appears eternal to us.
Yeah, but that's an eternalist view though, isn't it?
Yeah, but the point is it isn't infinitely regressive into the past.
Yeah.
It basically is co-occurring,
but they
and
believe,
arriving back in the future.
But eternalists like that believed in infinite regress.
So that's Hindus.
Yeah. I haven't looked
they
into
were
it
around.
to be. I'm
That's a
not.
polytheist view. Like a Vishnu. Well, it's also the Taoist view. That basically
But would they say that there's an infinite regress of causes as well?
Sorry?
Would they say there's an infinite regress of causation?
There was just an eternal circle.
Because, like I said to you before, Ibn Taymiyyah and Avicenna both believed in infinite something.
But they were linear.
Yes.
Yeah. No, but the Taoist view or the Hindu view is of an endless circle of life and death.
Yes. Okay. But then once again, it's not necessarily causation. If that's, I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
He's talking about the recreation.
Yeah.
Reincarnation. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. But so Avicenna had this view that he basically talked about the infinite regress of dependent things, and he says that's impossible to do. Right, so his argument, basically, his proof was this, and I think it's the strongest one we have, in my opinion. Yeah, he basically said, well, Leibniz took over and done his contingency argument with it, but I think it's from him. Yeah, because that's something that genuinely didn't come from the Greeks. That was innovative. He said the contingency argument. I don't think it came from the Greeks. There's nothing like it from the Greeks. He says that this is one thing that's a contribution. He says that basically, if you have a series of things, all of which are contingent, you have two possibilities. Either that series itself is independent, or that it depends on something external and independent. That's the only two possibilities. Because he says, you can't have a series of things.
Plato made that argument, just by the by.
But I don't think he made it in the way that he made it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so. Because Aristotle did it when he was talking about the physics and the metaphysics. When I looked at the works of Aristotle and his references to Plato,
there's something called a Thomistic argument, which is basically about an original causation, which is very much like the thing which has no contingency, right? The uncontingent cause.
Yes.
Yeah, that's like a Thomistic argument.
But the interesting thing about this is that. So here's why I'm always make the argument in two ways here, because Ibn Tufail, who's another guy, who's also kind of not known, it's not traditionalist in that sense, not normative within the Islamic circles.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, he said that there's two things. He said you can either make an argument from causation or an argument from contingency.
Yeah.
And he says those two things are not the same.
Yeah.
He says, but you should make both of them at the same time. Yeah, and then if this one doesn't work, then this one has to work. Okay. That's why I tried to do that with. Basically, it's like, I'm not getting this myself. Well, I'm saying to you, look.
That's why you said and or.
That's right. So this is not me. I'm just standing on the shoulders of giants, in that sense. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So.
And you're tall.
And I'm tall already. So basically, the argument is that the contingent things can either. So the series of contingent things, if it's infinite, it can either be independent or dependent. If it's dependent, it needs an independent. If it's not, then how could it exist? So it has to be. So basically, it has to be either an independent outside of it, or it has to be the independent itself. Now, there's a secondary argument that's connected to that. The argument that is secondarily made it's called Hujjat al-Tarkib, or the argument of parts. So basically, that there can't be like a series of things.
It's like a Zeno's paradox.
Yeah. So in the sense that
you basically just can't reduce something down because there's an infinite number of parts, never amount to anything.
But then, so therefore, because the parts. So for example, that series is made out of parts, and the parts depend upon itself. Anything that's made out of parts is dependent. Basically, that's the idea. Anything that's made out of parts is dependent. The series is made out of parts, therefore the series is dependent. Therefore, what we need is something which is independent and it's not made out of parts.
As long as it's linear.
Yes.
As long as it goes back progressively. But this is why the Taoists and the like never had that problem. Because they... You know, you come here a lot, and I know you believe in your religion, sincerely, but you would admit that there's a little bit of you that wants some attention.
Yes.
You're good, but not as much as that guy. Like, me too, right? I have to admit the same.
Yeah.
Just be like, I don't know what that's about. Anyway, so last thing I'd like to say to you, which is just like a kind of personal, kind of general state of the world kind of question. The world seems in a less good place, even though you don't remember me, than a couple of years ago when we debated. Like, there seems to me so many crises of knowledge, trust of information, news, fear of new technology, artificial intelligence. Just the world is changing out of kind of all perspective. the first world countries, if I can use that, insert whatever the kind of like politically correct term is, are becoming progressively less religious, it seems. How do you feel about the state of the world and the state of Islam as it engages with modernity? So by modernity, I mean, let's forget the new atheists, and they're gone now, right? There's kind of like a more kind of like sensible, I'd hope you agree, a less shrill kind of just, we're all trying to get along and make sense of the world together, right? Sam Harris is not beating, or Chris Fitch is not beating the lectern anymore. How do you think of how the state of the world, Islam, atheism, and the kind of general sense of chaos that people apprehend?
One thing is that in the Western Hemisphere, like, and especially in the western part of Europe and America, there's two things which are on the rise: Islam and atheism. And that seems to be quite like an ironic set of affairs that both of those things are on the rise. Thank you. You can take it. I don't want it.
Really?
Yeah. Thank you.
We should be wrestling here. That's like slap me. Yeah. Both of those on the rise.
Both of them on the rise.
Much faster, I think, than
yeah. So both
but
of
in the
those
world
things,
generally.
And I think that, you know, the thing is that here's what we need to understand, that now these are two different paradigms. People that, like me, traditionalist Muslims, have certain paradigms which I'm sure you're very aware of. Do you know what I mean? Like, because you've looked into our tradition, you've seen it. A lot of people are ignorant of that. And I think there's one thing that we need to know, is that we need to, both of us need to know the nuances, like, of both of our traditions. So, for example, a lot of the problems I face is caricaturing of certain aspects of jurisprudence in Islam, law and so on. And so what I try and achieve is that I try and get people to...
Do you mean like inflexible aspects of Sharia?
Yeah. So I feel like there's so much more flexibility that exists in Sharia than people think are coming now. And also from the other side, there's a lot to learn about the West. And the Arab world doesn't know about it, or let's say, for example, I know more about the Arab world, but the Muslim world doesn't know about it in the way it should know. It's also caricaturing from both sides. I think the best hope for the future is actually education. I know it sounds cliche, but if people that me and you that don't agree with each other's worldview, but at the end of the day can come to a conclusion that there's more nuance in what this person is saying than what I originally thought.
I thought if I study Islam, I'm going to respect it less than when I set out. That was my, like, once I get to the bottom of this. I didn't become a Muslim, but I became quite reverential of the belief system and the thinkers, the intellectual tradition, which we were never taught about in school. I think there's an overselling of like charisma, and there's a like Muslims are better than everything that's in your iPhone, and like we don't believe in. Hopefully, we don't believe in that narrative, but just that. Give it a fair shake. Let's tell you the actual, you know, the facts of this. Yeah, to eliminate those caricatures can only be hope, because I get as annoyed as. Not that it matters, I don't do anything about it, but I get as annoyed as a Muslim making an overclaim as I do about someone denigrating Islam, which is, you know, exactly the same kind of things. And so, that's a cliche we're both making. So,
but the nuances are there, and they just need to be, people need to be educated on them.
Do you see it as a kind of deliverance from chaos? That
Islam?
Well, you know, our political systems are rocking and rolling, you know, they're not, and the Muslim world is not without its troubles, but it has a long tradition. Religions have long traditions. What do you think of, like, the fact that, for instance, in America you have, or maybe in the world more generally, you have a question about whether there's even, you know, two genders or two sexes, these kinds of things, which have stood solid in religious traditions, not all of them, but, you know, they have. Do you kind of see that the kind of breakdown of meaning in the world is a kind of harbinger of people seeking something which, what we've both been looking for in this conversation, has a foundation?
Yeah, I think I think you'd agree with me that human beings, like, they're pattern seekers, number one. and number two, they're purpose seekers as well. These are the two P's that I'm sure,
agree.
you know, human beings are pattern and purpose seekers.
Yeah.
And that's what's attractive about Islam. I think a lot of people come to Islam because it gives them pattern and purpose. This is why things are the way they are, and this is why you are the way you are, and why you are here even, right?
So it's like how the heavens go and how to go to heaven.
Yeah,
Gives you both.
exactly. And atheism, in a sense, in an ironic sense, does something for atheists. That's, in a sense, I wouldn't say it's purpose or patterns, but it's kind of like ironically that, because if you think about what atheists are trying to do, they're trying to liberate themselves, really, in my opinion. They're trying to liberate themselves from some kind of superstition, from false beliefs, from what they consider as false beliefs, from many different things, from religious discourses, constraining practice, rituals and so on. All of that they're trying to liberate themselves. And in a weird sense, that actually facilitates kind of purpose for them, right? And that's why I was actually looking at one study, I forget the name of it now, but I can dig it up for you if you want, which analyzes, because a lot of these economic studies, like about the happy index and all that, that's not actually accurate, because it's not a psychological study. But there was one
Yeah,
particular,
they're just polls.
yeah. And they're based on HDI and GDP, and it's not rather than actual.
There's two separate things. So there's one set of, like, the World Happiness Index is literally just a poll.
Yeah.
And then there's United Nations, I think. Might even be World Bank. I think it's United Nations, which is an index of the things which relate more to prosperity.
Yeah.
And they're like, is your water clean?
Yes. But then they aggregate those
You'd be
things.
amazed at places where the water isn't that clean and people
People
are happy.
exactly. Exactly. So what I was going to say to you is that there is this. I'm going to get you this reference because I haven't to dig it up, but it's an interesting study which has been done on religiosity and happiness. And the idea is that the more religious you are, the more happy you are. However, what they found really interesting in the study was that atheists, which were very positive atheists or
on fire for atheism.
they also exhibited the same kind of happiness that those religious people.
It speaks to what you're saying about having like pattern and meaning.
Yes.
If you've got that,
And so I think that in terms of deliverance, obviously my worldview says that if you come to the Islamic understanding, you're going to get deliverance. But I guess people are going to find deliverance in whatever way they want to find it. But then the question is, how do you get purpose and truth, and ultimate truth, together?
Yeah.
And I think that genuinely, maybe it's something that الغزالي said that we need to pay more attention to.
He didn't end up in a good state of affairs.
Yeah,
I mean, in the end, he became
a Sufi. But then he was basically basing it on his instincts and his intuitions, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we should look into our instincts and intuitions.
Interesting. Yeah, because then we have like a common cause that we both. This is the thing I found, like such sympathy with this guy that I thought. We'll end with this, but it's kind of an appropriate place to end. The reason that he was on first authors I looked up, first Islamic scholars of jurisprudence, of fiqh and kalam and everything, was because he was so demonized by some scientific. So Stephen Weinberg said he killed off Islamic science with this book. And I'm like, I have to read this thing. It must be dynamite. And I realized it's a total misrepresentation. It's like a scapegoating, right, of this. And I found, as you always do, that the person is far deeper with these kinds of people. Some people you find are less interesting, but he was involved in exactly the same struggle that every human being is, trying to find pattern and meaning, and just. He was trying to be a good person. I don't know so much about whether he had this notion of being, a perfect person, but he was definitely trying to be honest. That's what comes across. It's like he can't lie to himself. It's like why he made life so difficult for himself, and that he kind of relaxed into a deep faith, but not one where he's like, "Come at me, bro. I know everything," and in that I was like, that's someone I agree with, and so
hopefully you can agree with him some more.
Well, yeah, you'd like,
But I'm sure one day, man.
Pleasure,
man.
I doubt
It was
that's going to
fantastic,
happen.
man. Thank you, man.
It was a
I learned a
pleasure.
lot from you, man. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.